Hello, and thank you once again for tuning into my podcast about outside the box. I don't know what I was about to say, but um, outside the box, where I aim to help people see that God is bigger than the boxes that we usually put Him in. I know I have struggled with this too. I mean, most of the time, people when they do stuff, it's from experience. So I definitely have experience in this area. And so I just wanted to kind of like share with people some of the things that I've learned over the years that have kind of helped me to kind of expand my understanding of God and grow spiritually and things like that. And so, but anyway, my name is Stephanie K, also known as Sage the Coach. I am a certified life and relationship coach, a Christian. I mean, my title is pretty long, so I'll try to condense it because I can actually coach in a lot of areas. But I typically say I am a Christian certified life and relationship coach. I also do some parenting, coaching. Um, so anything that pertains to your life as far as like different struggles that you have and you're trying to figure out God's path and plan for you and create a plan and move towards that plan when it comes to your life or relationships. Um, Parenting is included in relationships. I can help you with that. I kind of try to stay away a little bit from career stuff. Um, but anyway, that's what I do. I'm also a Christian author. I'm a business owner. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a lot of things, and so I kind of pour all of that experience into my podcast, into my books, into my coaching, just to try to help people again navigate their Christian walk. And so my show usually comes on Fridays at 12:30 p.m. I am starting a little bit late today due to some technical difficulties. And so here we go. You can also watch my podcast on um, Apple, the Apple app, and the Google Play Store, the Apple Store. I think that's. I don't have an Apple phone, so I don't know really how the Apple phone works. Um, but you can get me on those Play Stores if you download the app Entertainment Theater. So if you download the Entertainment Theater app, you can also watch my podcast on that app, and also that app is available on the Roku. So check me out, see what I'm about. Hopefully, I can offer some perspective that will be helpful to you. You can also look at my past shows. I've done shows about a lot of different topics that pertains to growing as a Christian, and most of them are topics that people struggle with, like porn, addiction, depression, suicide, miscarriages. So a lot of different serious topics that people struggle with as far as growing in their Christian walk and how those things relate to their Christian walk and stuff like that. So anyway, for the last few weeks or so, I've been kind of diving into a little bit of like, I guess, a basic understanding of what it means to just be a Christian in general, kind of like some foundational stuff. I talked about a book that I read by C.S. Lewis called The Problem of Pain. And he just talked about how we have pain in our lives and the purpose for pain and stuff like that. And even though I didn't want to agree with a lot of stuff he said, I do see the overall point with it. I love the book. And so from there, I just decided to talk about some other things that came to my mind in relation to the book, like about who God is, because a lot of people have kind of weird ideas about who they think God is. It was funny because I went to the art museum with my daughters yesterday, and the museum was massive and it was beautiful. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, my first time ever going to an art museum. And so you can see throughout all these cultures that people have these different ideas about who God is and what God is, and they put them in their artwork. A lot of the artwork that I saw was spiritually based. Of course, not all of it. And you can really see people's desire or process of trying to understand life on a deeper level. And so a lot of that has to do with spirituality, what is behind what it is that we see, and their understanding of who God is and their commitment to God, their connection to God, and just kind of what that entails as far as like everyday life. And so you see this throughout just artwork of human beings. And we always have this need to kind of question who is God, who is God, who is God, and understand life from a deep perspective. And I was just explaining to my girls that this is in our nature. Like, it is in our nature because God put it there intentionally, that it doesn't matter what time period you're born in, what culture you're born in. The majority of us has this innate um, desire to understand life on a deeper level and to understand who God is and try to connect with that being, however we kind of classify him. And so this is just in our nature. And so it really confuses me when I come across atheists, because I feel like even if you don't believe in Christian God, it is just totally out of human nature to not believe in anything. I think it's weird. I think shows a lack of deep thoughts, if for lack of a better word, because it's just in our nature. So that's my opinion. Um, and so I was just talking about who God is, my understanding of God. And if that's something that resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, you don't need to send me messages. You don't need to text me and try to go back and forth, because I'm not going to do that. If it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't resonate with you. So this is for people that it resonates with. And so because I have my own experience and I'm just sharing that. And one thing that, like, even with my kids, because I don't want them to like feel like, oh, that they have to believe in God just because I raised them to believe in God. I want their belief in God to be authentic. And so one of the things that I tell them is, one reason why I know that my relationship with God is the real God is because of the changes that I have seen in my life. If it was not for those changes, I could easily just go with again resonated with me and what I wanted and blah 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 blah. But I have seen some significant changes in my life that let me know that I'm not alone and that something is helping me, and it is way far beyond anything that I could do for myself. And I think even, you can kind of see that exemplified in Jesus when he came and was healing people and stuff like that. He was doing things that people could not do within themselves, and he was helping people. And it would really resonated with those people that, okay, this must be the Messiah, this must be the true God, because of the effect that he had on them personally, life changing things that only they could really that had meaning for them. If God came and heal one person of being blind, they are the only one who has had to deal with their blindness. So it's very, very personal. If he came and tried to heal you of something that was not your issue, it wouldn't be personal. And so because God has came and really dealt with me about a lot of things in my own personal life that were very, very life changing and transformative to me, it lets me know that the God that I serve is the real God. So I would implore people to like see how your life has changed with whatever God it is that you serve, and just really kind of contemplate that and figure out, what you're doing, because we have a brain. Like, that's what God gave it to us for. He gave it to us to seek answers, to seek him, to try to figure out this whole life thing. And when you don't do that, you're doing yourself a great disservice, because we definitely have the ability to do that. And so I always say that it's our responsibility to seek out truth. So, but anyway, I'm kind of getting a little bit off topic. So I was saying that I kind of went into in my last few podcasts about who God is, kind of explaining my perception of that, kind of like his standards for us, his nature, things like that, to try to have a deeper understanding of him. You might be surprised, but in that video, I kind of talked about sometimes putting the Bible aside. And I say this for any religion, whatever doctrine you're believing in, sometimes you have to put that stuff aside and just make a heart to heart connection with your creator. Because I see a lot of people who read the Bible, that know the Bible, but they do not have a relationship with God. They do not know God. And the Bible says that you will know these people basically by how they treat other people. And so that these people don't have a genuine relationship with God because of how they act and how they treat other people. Of course, the Bible says you will know them by their fruit. So so I went into that, and then I'm getting a little bit distracted. So I went into that, and then for the next show, I talked about what does it mean to live for God, because I see a lot of Christians who think that it's okay to sin, and I think that's weird because the Bible clearly says we should not be doing that. And it's one thing to struggle with sin; it's a different thing to be okay with living in sin. So don't think that I'm saying once you become a Christian, you become perfect and you shouldn't have any more struggles with sin. That is not true. And so, but there's a difference. I see Christians who are comfortable and justify their sin. And so to me, okay. So then I talked about that, and then I talked about the last week. I talked about, okay, and now what is spiritual growth? So how does spiritual growth connected to who God is, our relationship with God, you know, the pain that we experience in life and stuff like that. So that's just kind of like what I've been discussing, which leads me into what I want to talk about today, which is what is trauma or dealing with trauma. The reason why I decided to go into this, number one, is because God told me to talk about it. Um, and number two, I think it's one of the biggest hindrances to our spiritual growth. Um, a lot of people, trauma not only stops us from spiritually growing, but from their ability to see God. And it's a serious, serious problem. And so I want to talk about dealing with trauma to try to just give us a little bit of insight into, um, how to recognize those things and when they do become barriers, and a little bit of kind of like how to try to get over them and deal with them and recognize them and stuff like that. So before I get into like the main part, because I always like to lay a foundation, I want to give a example of my understanding of trauma. So my understanding of trauma, and mind you, I am a certified life relationship coach, things like that. So my understanding of trauma is when our mind, because it is basically, our mind was given to us by God to process information, and we get information through our senses. So as we process this information, and so what is processing information? Processing information is you gather all this input that you receive from your senses, whether spiritual, emotional, touch, taste, all that, and you assign meaning to that input. So that is what processing information is. And so when we process information, it's almost like I think about like those little coin machines, like, or even like when you go to Walmart and they check out and the self checkout and you feed your money in there. So if you consider us to be like that machine, and then we're feeding stuff in there, then boom, you come out with an answer. So we're getting fed information and we come out with the answer. And sometimes when the input that we have received is very, very damaging. And when I say damaging, I mean totally contrary to our nature, totally contrary to our experience of life, or what God intended for us, such as abuse and neglect and poverty and stuff like that. Our processing gets overwhelmed, and because of that, we come out with the wrong information. We come out with the wrong meaning that we assign to that experience. And so when we come out with the wrong meaning, what lets you know you have come out with the wrong meaning to that experience is because you keep repeating it, because it's wrong. And so you keep going around in the same circle like a broken record, because the meaning that you have brought out from that experience is it's like an error message on your computer. So for God, or I think when it comes to our life experience, when we come out with the wrong meaning, we have to keep going through it over and over and over, because not only can we not move forward with that information, because it actually stops us from moving forward, because that is the opposite of what God wants for us, which is growth. we get stuck in this revolving cycle that we can't get out of, and we continue to relive the same moments over and over and over and over and over again until we process it differently and come out with a better or a meaning that's closer to the truth of what that experience actually meant. So yeah, so when we process information, um, the meaning that we come out with is now weighed and judged against the universal. I'm trying to think if I'm explaining this right. So the universal understanding of right and wrong. Like we don't make that. We don't make an understanding of right and wrong. God created right and wrong. So once we process information and we come out with an understanding, it is now weighed against God's understanding or God's laws of right and wrong. So when we come out of that information, that experience with the wrong understanding, so it doesn't fall in the right category, we continue to repeat those things until we get a better understanding. So it's like it's bad, but it's good because if we didn't keep repeating it, then we'll just go forward in life and keep following. So just imagine somebody not getting kindergarten right. How much better are they going to get first grade and second grade and third grade? So you keep redoing kindergarten until you get it right. So yeah, so that is to me what trauma is. Trauma is we have had an experience that is so traumatic and overwhelming to our senses that we don't understand it and walk away from it with the correct meaning from that experience. And so you start to repeat it. And if you when you start to repeat it, it goes into your subconscious mind to the point where you don't really know that you're repeating it. Sometimes people know that they're repeating it, but a lot of times we don't. And it just is like you're on a broken record. So when you don't know that you're doing it, it starts to be the primary motivation for your actions and your decisions and your choices and things like that. You don't even understand that these things are dictating your behavior and what you do to that degree. So that's why I said some people are not fully aware of that they're doing it. So I'll give you an example. Say if you were neglected as a kid, and you walk away from that experience with the understanding that you don't have value, that the reason why you were neglected is because you don't have value, and you walk through life with this subconscious belief that you do not have value. You won't, just an example, you probably won't go to school because you feel like, what is the point? I don't have value anyway. You probably will suffer in your relationships because either you will do too much in your relationships because you think you don't have value and now you have to convince the person to try to stay with you, or you'll do too little because you feel like you don't have value, and then it doesn't matter anyway, if somebody leaves you or stays, or. And so you might not, apply for certain jobs because you feel like you don't have value. You're not going to invest yourself in any passions that you have because subconsciously you think that if you think you don't have value, then you're not going to think that anything you do has value either. So that is trauma. So in order to heal from that, so now you can be in that broken, traumatic state with this faulty belief about yourself. Again, it doesn't fall into the God's understanding of right and wrong, which is that you believe something wrong about yourself. So that it's not true. It's not true. That experience of being neglected does not mean you don't have value. And so until you come up with a different understanding of that experience, you're going to keep repeating that belief throughout your life in different scenarios, like I just explained. Now, you can become a Christian and still believe that. A lot of people have misunderstanding that once you become a Christian, everything is fine, you're great, and all this and that. And it's just not true. You are still broken and everything like that because those beliefs have been implanted in your subconscious mind, and it takes time for God to work them out of you. Spiritually, you're reconnected to God, so that the process of working it out of you is now possible. But you do have to put in the work and take that time to work those beliefs out of you, which is what the Bible talks about when it talks about renewing your mind. And as your mind get renewed, as you continue to submit to God and grow your relationship with God, those beliefs will come to the surface for you to deal with them. God will point them out to you. But you can be Christian and still have a lot of trauma in you that is not dealt with, and that is affecting your relationship with God, your view of God, your view of yourself, your view of others, your entire life. So, and people, I would say 90% of people have this problem. And I think maybe about half of them don't even realize they have the problem. They do things, they think it's normal, they think it's them, they think it's what they have to do, they think there's nothing wrong with what they do, um, and they just continue doing it. But the way that you will see that there's a problem is, again, you keep getting these reoccurring um, problems. And then it comes to you to say, okay, you know what, this keeps happening to me. So let me try to figure out why this keeps happening to me. And of course, go to God to try to help you understand things that you cannot understand on your own in your limited understanding of things. And so, I talk about a little bit about this when in the other video about how what it means to live for God, is that this is a lot of the process that God takes us through, which is cleaning up a lot of the faulty beliefs and understandings that we have about ourselves, Him, people, stuff like that. And it is a lifelong process. I will tell you, I even struggle with stuff still. I'm just like, I don't quite understand why this is this and why this is that. But I'm very aware of my limited understanding of things. And so I try not to, I try not to jump to conclusions about stuff and leave my mind open to learn. Which again is easier said than done. So, so anyway, so you can be a Christian with trauma, and a lot of times these things does interfere in our walk with God, and we struggle and suffer a lot because of them. Sometimes even if God delivers you from it, it can still come back up later. So you might be thinking, okay, well, how does He deliver you from it? So if you if you have this faulty belief, and you, especially if you don't know you have it, the very first thing God is going to do is bring it to your attention. Once He brings it to your attention, it leaves your subconscious mind and comes into your conscious mind, which is the only place where we can change our beliefs. You cannot change your beliefs in your subconscious mind. You can think of it as your backup memory systems or whatever. But until you bring it into your in the forefront of your mind, that is when you can make changes to your beliefs and get rid of them, clean them up, stuff like that. So God has to bring it to your attention. Once He brings it to your attention, it's time to now deal with it. And once you deal with it, and the process of dealing with it kind of looks different for different people. Some people might need to go to counseling. Some people might need to get a coach. Some people might need to go reconcile with some family members. Some people might need to journal. Some people might need to cry. Some people might need to punch some stuff. So it just depends on what it is, how deep it is, how bad it is. But God can help you navigate it. And that's one thing that I kind of like about David. Even though I don't want to say David had trauma, but I'm sure he did. But he really allowed himself to walk with God to navigate whatever it was that he was going through, as opposed to running away. Because a lot of people do that. I have wanted to do that. But he kind of went through the motions with God. If he wanted to cry, he cried. If he wanted to complain, he complained. If he was struggling with his faith, he just said he was struggling with his faith. And so walking through that with God is still better than kind of running away and just acting like you don't want to deal with stuff, because that doesn't solve anything, because now it's not being dealt with because it's not in the forefront of your mind. So I see a lot of people, even when you're struggling with sin, Like you can't get over some certain sins and you can't stop doing some certain things that you know are wrong. It's usually connected to trauma, some trauma that you haven't dealt with. And so your mind has attached this behavior that you're doing as the remedy or comfort mechanism for the trauma that you haven't dealt with. And so now, for example, say if you drink alcohol, a lot of people drink alcohol to subdue trauma. They don't want to deal with some certain things, they're unhappy about some certain things. And so now your body kind of gets stuck in this because your body gets addicted to alcohol, but it stems from your mind kind of running away from stuff. So even when you 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 understand the physical barriers of stop trying to quit drinking, you still struggle with it emotionally because letting go of that means now you have to deal with the thing that you've been trying to cover. So a lot of times, even when we struggle with sin, it goes back to trauma that we have not dealt with, that needs to be dealt with. And again, it'll look different for different people. Some people go to counseling, all that type of stuff, pray. Like I've heard so many different stories about how people deal with trauma or have gotten over trauma that I don't want to try to give you a cookie cutter prescription of like, this is how you deal with trauma because it's going to be different. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's painful. Even if you have God with you, it is still not easy to address your trauma. And I see a lot of people run away from God because they don't want to address their trauma, because they don't want to dig back and try to figure out, why am I continuing to do this? I keep getting this bad result. It doesn't match with the Bible. It doesn't match with the fruit of the Spirit that God says I should have. Something is wrong, and they do not want to address it at all. They're very afraid. And then they don't even realize that they gradually start moving away from God. They either blatantly move away from God and say, you know what, I don't want to be a Christian no more. I'm not doing this. It's too hard. Or they try to take God along with them as they gravitate away from him, and they don't even realize that God is not with them anymore. And I will use Saul in the example in the Bible because he did not want to listen. And even though his thing might or might not have been trauma based, but he didn't want to listen. Maybe he had an issue with feeling like he was less than. And maybe he had an issue with feeling like he was less than because of something that happened. And so now he gets this title where God tells him the truth, which is no, you're not less than. You're actually this, you're actually that. He gets so covetous to keep that thing that he starts pushing God to the side in order to keep it, because if he did what God told him to do, which was to not take anything and to kill all the sheep and don't to kill all the animals and the people and don't keep their stuff, he would have lost, in his mind, he would have lost this position that he found himself in. And so again, it could have been trauma based. I'm not saying it is, but it could have been. And I'm just giving an example of how that could have been trauma based. And so even though he wants this title and he wants this status, he doesn't want to listen to God in order to hold on to it. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards, but he wants to hold on to it, and he starts moving away from God because he's holding on to that thing more than he's holding on to God. And he doesn't fully realize that he's left the favor and grace of God, that God is not with you anymore. And he is so infuriated that God is not with him anymore that he wants to take his frustrations out on David and kill David. So this is how it happens. This type of stuff still happens today. Like people read the Bible and they say, oh, the Bible's old fashioned, doesn't relate to us today. Human nature is, it just never changed. We still doing the same stupid stuff, the same dysfunctional stuff, the same jacked up stuff that people were doing in the Old Testament. It's human nature that you need to watch out for, not the culture that surrounds the human nature, but the consistent nature of humanity throughout all time and all culture and all places and all people. We're doing the same exact stuff, which is sometimes trying to meet our needs in a dysfunctional, messed up, jacked up, sometimes evil ways, you know. And those needs sometimes are get deformed because of trauma. And so we get a misconception about what our needs actually are, and then we start chasing the wrong things and all this and this and that. And this is the thing that the devil really holds over our heads a lot, because he understands our nature more than we do. I think he understands God's nature more than we do. And because he understands God's nature, it's very easy for him to manipulate ours. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to kind of give those little insights into like trauma. We need to deal with our trauma. We need to not cover up our trauma. I take it very seriously that I deal with my trauma. Anytime I see stuff coming up in myself that I don't like, that doesn't match with the fruit of the spirit, especially if it's a reoccurring thing, I try to deal with it right away and like, okay, God, what is going on with me? Um, and sometimes it's not trauma, so don't think it has to be this big traumatic thing every time. But we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're doing, what we're not doing, how stuff is affecting us. And when we do that, and especially take it to God in prayer and stuff like that, that becomes the basis for how we start working through our trauma. So yeah, don't get stuck in sin, repeating sin, and letting trauma hinder your relationship with God and your growth and things like that. It is very, very difficult. I won't lie. Sometimes, when the Bible talks about God giving this heavy burden to mankind, it is a heavy burden. Like sometimes it's like, yeah. So it's hard. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. It's definitely hard. But it's better than, because the hardness of just life without God doesn't really lead to anything better. But the hardness of life with God has more meaning, and it leads to something better, even if it's the afterlife where you will now live in peace with God for all eternity. So it is still better, but it is hard. You have to work through it. You have to be determined to work through it. And one thing that I always tell, people that I talk to about God, you have to get to a point where you want God more than you want those other things. Because if you don't, you're going to leave God to chase those things, even if you think that's not what you're doing, because those things are more important to you. But when it comes down to like, do I do this wrong thing to get what I want and try to take God along with me as I do that wrong thing, or do I let this thing go so that I can stay with God? Is going to be a question that you have to repeatedly ask yourself and make a decision about. If you make the decision to hold on to God and follow His path instead of what looks like it will make you happy, what looks like it'll make things better, what looks like the right thing, but it's hurting other people, um, that is how you grow, when you continuously choose God over those other things. So I hope I shed a little bit of light into trauma. I just kind of want to talk about dealing with it. But yeah, so that's it for my podcast today, Outside the Box. Again, my name is Stephanie K, also known as Sage the Coach. And sorry, I don't know why I keep yarning, but I am a life coach, a Christian life coach. So if you guys have any trouble with stuff like this, you can reach out to me. I'm not a counselor or a therapist, but I do coach in these areas to kind of help people navigate the path that's necessary to kind of start overcoming some of these things, help you come up with a plan of what works for you. Because like I said, some people, everybody's path towards dealing with their trauma is not going to look exactly the same. So you might need some help figuring out, okay, what will work for me, especially if you tried stuff and it hasn't worked. It's always good to sometimes get a different perspective. And so if you have any issue with this, you want to talk about it further when it comes to your own personal journey, please reach out to me. I do offer first time free sessions for anyone that is interested. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. You guys have a great weekend and tune in next week. I think I'm going to talk about another book that I read. But tune in next week for Outside the Box at 12:30 p.m. on Friday. I might be changing my time too. I want to mention that because my kids are going back to school, so my schedule has to change a little bit. And I think I'm going to change the time up a little bit. If I do, it's going to be earlier in the day instead of at 12:30. But anyway, so you guys make sure you tune in next week. And again, send me any questions, comments, and things like that that you have. Um, so I can kind of dive into your own personal to make it more relatable to you. So that's it. Thank you so much. And again, tune in next week. Make sure you share my content on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, which is now called X, which is stupid. Instagram, YouTube, and I think that's it. So make sure you share my content, follow like my page. And I think that's it. So thank you so much, you guys. You be blessed. And again, have a good weekend. Goodbye.